We are going to be talking about risk management, identity theft today. As everyone knows, identity theft is a crazy pandemic that has just gone crazy throughout the world. We can't stop it, so what we have to do is there are some laws and new things that are in effect. And what we're going to do today is just kind of give you some information, share this information with you, and then show you some action steps that can be taken as companies out there as we're talking to you folks today. So we'll just go ahead and move forward. The first thing we're going to talk about, we have this couple of objectives. So basically we're going to identify what identity theft is, how it affects your company. We're also going to go through updated laws and statistics, basically tell you what your liabilities are, your responsibilities for companies. This is all dealing with laws that are coming out from the FTC. This is not, Larry's law. This is laws that are coming down from the federal government that are allowing or requiring companies to comply with this. And then also what you need to do to adhere to the regulations and mitigate potential loss as a company. Okay? One thing we need to make sure we point out, and I'm going to point it out several times throughout the presentation here today, is that there is a compliance deadline of December 1st this year from the Federal Trade Commission, meaning that what the stuff that we're going to talk about today, these laws, the red flags rules under the FACTA law, is going to require to be in place by December 1st this year. Okay? Moving forward, what is identity theft? We're going to kind of back up a little bit. I know everybody pretty much knows what that is, but the FTC's definition is simply when someone gets your information, your personal information, and uses it without your permission to commit fraud or other crimes. Okay? Here's just some facts and figures about identity theft that a lot of people are not aware of. 40 million victims over the last 5 years. Every 3.5 seconds an identity is stolen. Over 230 million people were affected by data breaches in the past 12 months. Now, looking at the first item there is 40 million victims. The third item is data breaches, and the 230 million. The difference between the two, the third one is when the information is actually out there and the possibility of information being stolen is there. Okay, for example, I live over in Hillsborough County, and January and February of 2009, whenever someone buys a home, your deed is recorded and put up on the property appraiser's office. Well, the person who puts that up is responsible for blackening out the Social Security numbers of the folks who buy homes. So this would be an example for in January, February last year, everyone who bought a home in Hillsborough County, the property appraiser's office, that person forgot to black out the Social Security numbers. So therefore, that would have been considered a data breach. Now, if someone's information was actually stolen, then they would have, in fact, become a victim. So when the information is out there and possibility of being stolen, that's what the difference is between a breach and the victim is actually someone who has their information stolen. Here's the biggest problem we have with identity theft today is that only 1 in 700 thieves are prosecuted. Think about that, folks. 699 out of 700 are getting away with it. So the problem is they can't stop the identity theft. It's not going to get any better. In fact, the FTC projects that it's going to get 20 times worse in the next 2 years. So it's going to get worse, continue to get worse. FTC reports that 1 in 4 people projected to be victims in 2010. If you haven't been a victim yet in 2010, well, there's still a few months left in 2010, so something could possibly happen as well. Here's kind of a staggering number. The FBI just reported that revenue from identity theft has just surpassed that of drug trafficking, over $9 billion per year. So that's just a crazy number. So just some facts and figures about identity theft. Here's a couple of statistics. The incidence of malicious attacks rose from 12% in 08 to 24%. Now, look at that, folks. In 1 year's time, malicious attacks doubled. Now, really, 12% doesn't seem like a lot, but it really is when you're dealing with the type of businesses and the amount of businesses that are out there today. The data breach survey conducted by the Ponemon Institute, they do a lot of information surveys and stuff like that, compiling this information. The average organizational cost of a data breach increased nearly 2% to $6.75 million in 2009. The most expensive breach in the survey was $31 million. We actually just had a recent one that's a little bit more than that. The least expensive was $750,000. Now think about that, folks. To most companies today, even the least expensive, a $750,000 data breach would put most companies out of business. Some of the larger companies could afford to write that check, but a $30 million breach would definitely put some companies out of business. Now here's just something for you. If you were to experience just a security breach in your company, here's some of the facts. 20% of your affected customer base will no longer do business with you. 40% will consider ending the relationship with you. 5% will be hiring lawyers. Of course, I actually think that number would probably be a little bit higher because it seems like everybody wants to hire an attorney to do something, it seems like today. So when it comes to cleaning up the mess, here's what happens. Companies on average spend 1,600 work hours per incident. Now, that's a ton of time that would be wasted on a data breach, okay? Average cost per victim ranges between $40,000 and $92,000. Now, what we're going to talk about as far as victims today, we're going to talk about clients and the regulations, but we're also going to talk about employees. And think about this. If your company were to have an employee, a data breach, now here's a fact for you. The FTC released a survey that says that 90% of all identity theft occurs in the workplace. And of that 90%, it involves payroll records and employment records, not client lists. Because think about it. If I got your client list, if I was a hacker, then I'm going to have a name, a phone number, and an address. That's not going to be enough information for me to have a good day with identity theft. Now, if I were to get a hold of your employees' information, now you've got the date of birth, I've got social security numbers, names and addresses. If your company does direct deposit, now I've got your their financial information as well. So think about this: from a $40,000 to $92,000 cost per victim. If you have 50 employees, what that could actually entail, because if the breach is linked back to your company, then according to the FTC, you are 100% responsible for their losses, whether it happens to be a client, whether it happens to be an employee. Whoever is responsible for the loss is responsible for retribution. So the legal risk, what your organization will suffer in just the event of one data breach. Think about it from a legal risk as well as an expense. You're going to have data breach notification costs. You're going to have to notify everybody who's been affected. You're going to have victim recovery costs. We just talked a little bit about that. Public relation nightmares. People are not going to want to do business with companies who are in the mainstream media involved in losing information and stuff. Substantial jury awards, civil liability, also fines, penalties. If the laws were in effect today, December 1st had already passed, the fines and penalties would come down through the FTC. Audits required by governmental agencies, making sure that stuff doesn't happen again. Of course, you'd have attorneys' fees, legal costs. I mean, the amount of money that's just going to be involved, disruption of daily business, employee time to resolve identity theft problems. I mean, even if you had a breach, your employees are still going to have time to deal with that type of loss. Just crazy amounts of numbers. Here's some examples of some recent losses as a result of data breaches. Now think about this, folks. Some of y'all are probably familiar with the TJ Maxx Visa scandal where they stole all the credit cards. Visa agreed to pay $40.9 million for this data breach from TJ Maxx. Here's Heartland. Some folks may not know who Heartland is, but just in case you don't, Heartland, when you take your credit card and you swipe it anywhere, at a restaurant, a department store, that type of thing, Heartland is a company that does the processing behind the scenes. So they're the one who actually processes the transaction between that merchant and your bank. They had a breach, paid $60 million to Visa recently. They also paid about $10 million to American Express. MasterCard has not been released yet, so who they had to pay, how much they had to pay for that one. Now, please don't be as crazy as this guy was. This mortgage broker actually dumped consumer records in his dumpster outside the back of his office. Now he paid a $35,000 civil penalty to the Federal Trade Commission. But just think about it, folks. If that information had been stolen and someone had used that information to, for whatever reason, identity theft in any way, whether it was a driver's license, whether it was a bank account, this mortgage broker would have been held responsible for that type of thing. A lot of this stuff, folks, with the FACTA laws and the red flags, is really heightening the awareness of taking care of people's information just a little bit more stringently than we have maybe in the past, okay?